It's around that time again. Today I'm going to be making a brand new tier list, ranking every meta unit in Anime Last Stand as of update 58. Keep in mind, everything in this video is just going to be my opinion, so take everything with a grain of salt. But I still hope this video helps you. If it does, maybe if you like or subscribe. But anyways, let's get into it. Okay, today we're going to be starting off with the rankings from my last tier list video, so if you want an explanation for everything you see here, be sure to go check that video out. Now before we get into ranking the new units from update 58, the Dragon Ball update, and Himeno, because I forgot to rank her last time, I do want to make a few changes to the list we have right here, because we do have some changes to the meta or things I overlooked before. So Madoka, I'm going to move her down from meta overall to meta infinite. I do think she's still pretty okay for progressive, but not necessarily meta for progressive content anymore, probably going right about here. She has a very strong nuke and pretty okay full AoE damage. Kashimo I'm going to move up above Fire Shinra. He is actually very good for his bolt damage and pretty strong supporting value from his passives as well. I kind of overlooked that before. Water Shinra I'm going to move down to support and right below as Death probably. Personal damage kind of fell off in the meta. Light Shinra I'm going to move down to below Kefla. Very good for just kind of personal damage, but less supporting value than all the other forms of Shinra, and just kind of greedy bolt damage there. Goku I'm going to move down as well, because there are better godly options, especially for support. He has nothing, just kind of a raw damage unit with a pretty solid nuke. Still meta overall, but I'm going to move him down right about here. Sun Jinwoo, same thing, pretty selfish, godly, pretty expensive for just his own damage and his summons. He does have the summoning passive, which can still be good for progressive, still probably meta overall and usable, but with the way that summons work in this game, how they can only walk into like one enemy before they die, not very good. So I'm going to move him down to probably the bottom of the tier. And I do want to clarify, especially after the skill tree rework, whoever decided to drop the skill tree rework, it was really dumb in my opinion. It kind of like restricts your options with what you can kind of customize and how you build your people. With DOT units, people have like bleed and hemorrhage and everything. A lot of them would have like custom skill trees to keep 100% uptime. Sun Jinwoo was one of those. So with the skill tree rework, he can no longer get good SPA for his mutilate, and he is definitely falling off there. Sakura I'm going to move down a little bit. She still is very good. I'm going to move her down. Progressive value is not quite there as much as I thought it was, and I put her probably above Fire Shinra here. Gojo, his personal damage is still pretty good, but I wouldn't say it's like meta for progressive or infinite anymore. And he's mostly going to be a support in both game modes, definitely the top of the tier though. Very, very solid. But Conrad, we're going to move him down to decent, and right above Rize here. He is good for progressive kinda, and I feel like the infinite tier doesn't really suit him entirely, because he does have a strong nuke, but not too crazy for infinite runs, mostly a progressive unit, honestly, and just an okay one, not too meta. For meta early, I'm going to move Power down to decent. She is pretty good, especially depending on how you use her with her weapon rotation, the blood weapons or whatever. She can do good damage, but another unit that I kind of mentioned with Sun Jinwoo, where she has like bleed and hemorrhage, you want to have good SPA for the uptime, and you can't really do that with the skill tree rework, so it's kind of okay. Moving her down from meta early to decent, and right above Yoru here. She is very, very good, especially for her nuke that you get. Goku Black I'm also going to move down to decent, because he just doesn't really cut it for meta early anymore. His clones after they ramp up can be good, but because he takes a while to ramp up with his clones, he's just kind of okay, and I'd put him probably right about here in decent tier. For the support tier, I'm going to move Aizen, move him down below Quincy King here, because I think I overestimated his damage buff. And then Dark Shinra I'm going to move up from support, because he just has Despair. I don't think he's really a support unit anymore, because there are prevalent Despair units now with Yuta and Meliodas there. So just the Despair from Dark Shinra is not too valuable as a support. I'm going to move him up to Meta Infinite, where his nuke has a lot more value. I'd probably put him towards the bottom of it for now. I also got quite a few comments about Caster Saber, and I went back and tried her out again. She can be good if you know what you're doing with her bell rotation. She is definitely a very technical unit, very strategic. You definitely want to use her abilities at different timings. But she is very good, and I put her above Unohana at least here. Kaido I'm also going to move down because we got a new Days unit, which is a Luffy rework, which we'll kind of talk about. Kaido I'm going to move down to below Pucci, because his main supporting value was from having the Dazed passive. Unohana I'm also going to move down because bleed meta is good, but not quite as good as we thought it was at first with Denji coming out. She's still a good bleed buffer, but I put her right about here in support below Subaru and Erwin. And Medusa I'm going to move above Kurumi actually, because Kurumi is more expensive to get her uptime, and her buff is not even that good compared to Medusa getting petrified for cheaper and full AoE. The final thing I'll be changing about this list before we jump into the new people, we have the Luffy rework, and I'm going to say his rework is very good. He costs 4k to place now, so a little bit less progressive oriented, but he is still pretty good for progressive. Very good DPS, he gets full AoE pretty early, very good godly lead for everything, very general godly buffer. All of his passives are very strong. He has like a specific version of random. He has a very strong full AoE damage thing where he goes into sleep mode. Overall, very solid, and I'll put him in meta overall and probably above Asta, honestly. I know a lot of you might not agree with that and might be kind of mad I'm putting him above Asta, because Asta is a very glazed unit. For a good reason, he's a very strong one. But I do think Luffy is better, and that's expected for a godly anyway. And now we can move on to the new units from Update 58, otherwise known as the Universe 7 Dragon Ball Update. So for Goku and Vegeta Blue, I am going to count them separately from the Gogeta Fusion. They are actually very good for early game. Like, surprisingly good for meta early. I put them right about here, and do take this ranking with a grain of salt, okay? I don't have the unit well invested myself. I got pretty unlucky with rerolls and I'm stuck with Overlord on him for now. But I did do the testing and calculations using somebody else's. On placement, these two have high damage, good crit scaling passives, and then also the self-application of Weakened with low SPA. So very good for progressive actually. And his upgrades are very cheap at first. Himeno, from the Chainsaw Man update, I forgot to rank her last time. I'd put her in decent and right below Rimuru. She's pretty good for her summon damage, but the way summons work, as I mentioned with Sun Jin Woo, because they can only walk into one enemy before they go away, not too crazy. The Divine Boost for Vegito, pretty good DPS, but mostly an infinite unit. He has pretty solid nukes, not really infinite potential like for infinitely scaling damage, nothing percent based or anything, but he does have a very high multiplier and pretty high base damage to scale with it, so very good nuke. For Broly, his Divine Boost is actually very strong. Full AoE on final upgrade, crazy range, crazy damage overall on all upgrades, honestly. He does take a while to ramp up to his full potential, but even before he ramps up, his damage is just very good. He does also have Cripple to help out with your teammates, but he is overall just a very greedy damage unit. Takes a while to ramp up and does very, very strong. Vegeta Divine Boost. I'm also going to say he's meta overall. He's kind of okay. Like, he fits in the meta overall. He's towards the bottom of it for a reason. He's not too great, but his damage can be really good across all upgrades. He does have a weaker version of Plasma, which is good for buffing Bolt, and also personal DPS is not that bad. And then he does have a weird thing at the bottom of his passive that says, increases crit damage by 50%. Now, assuming that only applies to him, he'd be right about here. He's very good for personal damage in that regard, because we're kind of seeing a return of raw damage and crit meta, which I'll talk about again whenever we get to Garou. If his 50% crit thing does apply to other units, he's actually even better, but right now, I'd say he's right about here in meta overall. Galaxy Ranger. This guy would go in meta early and actually very good. Pretty much he has high crit scaling, very high crit rate, and crit damage, very solid. Mostly just for his personal damage, even though he has Cripple. Cripple can be helpful, but overall, with a crit build, very solid raw DPS. Granola is a support unit. His personal damage is not too great, but he does have two passives that are going to help us out. He has the Shred effect, which is brand new. He's going to increase raw damage by 10%. I think crit vulnerability by 10%, and then crit damage taken by 15%. And then also he's going to apply the effect Exposed, I believe it's called, which makes enemies take a lot more damage and elemental damage. The problem with Granola is he doesn't really have like good uptime on any of those buffs. They kind of have to line up with the timing on that. He can provide pretty significant buffs. I'll put him right here in support. They don't have the best uptime on him. The way Jiren's Divine Boost works is actually very weird. He doesn't want to crit. He's going to build up the overheat bar, I think it's called, whenever he doesn't crit. Which is kind of bad for a raw DPS unit, because for the most part he's raw damage. He does have a couple things that can proc burn and blaze periodically, but he's mostly raw damage, full AoE very high. And for any unit that doesn't rely on dot for their main DPS, you want to be relying on crit as much as you can, and benefiting from crit builds like Garou lead. So because this guy doesn't want to crit and he's a raw DPS unit, it puts him in a really weird spot, where I'd say he's really good. Not the best for progressive. He takes a while to ramp up anyway, but he's very good. I wouldn't say better than Broly. Some people say better than Broly, but I think he's just kind of awkwardly in a weird spot where he doesn't want to crit, but he should need to for the highest DPS output. Gogeta, the fusion for the previously mentioned Goku and Vegeta in the meta early tier. This guy's definitely going meta infinite. He has very solid nukes and just very solid DPS as well. The problem is he takes a while to get to. For the fusion, you need like 10 billion DPS on the previous form. But he has very strong nukes, very strong passives for applying full map-wide like pressure and just high damage. And overall, yeah, very good DPS across all upgrades, very solid for infinite for sure. And finally, the guy I rolled mystical on this update, Frieza, okay. The Frieza Divine Boost is very bad. This guy is garbage, okay? He has very mediocre damage until he ramps up after 10 waves. and then he gains Hemorrhage, which will increase his damage quite a bit. But even after the increased damage, this guy is not good. Accounting for how long he takes to ramp up, combined with just how mid the final ramped up version is, I don't think this guy's good at all, and I'd put him right here in decent, towards the bottom of the list. He's very bad. I do want to move Garou down. This is only because I'm getting a lot of comments about it. You guys are really giving me an earful about I'm glazing Garou and that Ichigo should be higher. Look, I stand by that Garou's better. In most cases, I think the Garou's better. I think the Garou for 2.5k provides so much value that people just don't understand. And for you guys to understand, I'm going to send it off to my good friend Sinby Ballin to explain this, because he made a whole document for it and everything.
You feel free to pause at any time if you want to read anything on screen. I'm not going to read this directly. Firstly, how his buff works and the uptime on it. So with the maximized Garou SPA, there's literally only 0.25 or 1/4 of a second where his buff isn't applied. And the reason why his buff is so good, the 50% crit damage buff, basically it doesn't just add 50%, but it scales off of your base crit damage and it'll add that amount of crit damage. Your units can be literally anywhere in his range. So first I'll talk about Hikari. In 20 attacks without the Garou buff, he does 72.7 billion damage. And with the Garou buff, in 20 attacks, he does 104.2 billion damage. So that means he added 30 billion damage over 20 attacks, or 1.5 billion per attack on average. All right, now I want to talk about Maki. I'm not going to talk about Maki in particular, but I will talk about a kind of fake unit that I made that does 100 million every 5 seconds. Without Garou buff, this imaginary unit of mine did 3.36 billion damage in 20 attacks. And with Garou buff, they did 7.18 billion damage in 20 attacks, almost doubling their DPS in 20 attacks. He's really good, and people don't really understand that, and that's why I just kind of wanted to make this and show him off, I guess.
Thank you for that, Sinby Ballin. Again, the documents for all his DPS calculations, everything will be linked in the description. But Garou is very crazy. I think he's very good, but I will put Ichigo above him for the sake of people who click towards the end of the video not giving me an evil, angry comment because they think Ichigo is better. And for the most part, there is just a lot of content where Ichigo can kind of clear it regardless of Garou buff, so. Well, I think we have the final rankings. Of course, let me know what you think in the comments down below. This is just my opinion at the end of the day, with a lot of testing put into it though. And I want to mention that I spent hours testing the stuff on here, okay? The only people I'm not fully sure about are some of the new units like Vegeta and the Vegeta and Goku, like early waves. I haven't really tested them fully, but I'm confident about my previous testing and my own personal experience with these units for everybody else on this list pretty much. Some of the new units are always iffy. As soon as they come out, I try and rank them the best I can so you guys don't have to wait on a tier list. But everything else I do test and I put time into, so please be respectful with your comments. But do let me know your opinion, I'm always open to criticism. Anyways, thank you to my channel members for making this video possible, you guys are the best. Thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, hope to see you next one, and have a great day.